Hi everyone, thanks for plugging in a Chorus One podcast. We are here today with Matan, co-founder and CEO of eOracle. So I imagine that most of our listeners are very familiar with the concept of restaking, and we know that EigenLayer recently launched last month in April 2024, and eOracle is one of the AVSs launching their increasing number of projects. So basically, we have seen EigenLayer paving in the path for independent, decentralized networks. So basically, making easy for new projects to become decentralized. Then we are ready to jump in with Matan today and understand how does this actually happen in practice on the project perspective and all the challenges and other specificities on that matter. So thank you very much, Matan, for your time for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Can we start perhaps with a brief intro about yourself and your background? Also curious to understand about the how was the inception of eOracle as a project?
Sure thing. Yeah, in essence, we're working from Lightblocks Labs, which are the labs that developing the Oracle network. And we are working on that for close to 2 years now. I have started my journey in the space in 2016. I moved to California, and through Singularity University, I learned about it was early days of Ethereum and just the idea of programmability on the blockchain. And back then, we were experimenting with how that would look like, how smart contracts would look like for maybe global settlement, or not really for, I would say, a decentralized and open innovation like we are seeing in the space today, but really for very specific use cases that are now possible on this new thing that's called blockchain. And that really ignited my imagination as a young person that's moving to a place like California and is able to work with a variety of people from all around the globe, from different nationalities. I was also reading back then Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I don't know if you had a chance of reading that book. And it wasn't the right timing for me, as coordination is what got us through. It's what made Homo sapiens the dominant species on this planet. Coordination at scale. And learning about blockchain at the same time of reading Yuval's book made a lot of sense to me, as this is the next stage of global coordination. This is what can take the potential that we have today with the internet and really allow permissionless innovation, no matter where you are, where do you live, what is your background, how much connections do you have. You are able to build things on this platform, and people around the world can trust that what they're seeing is actually what is about to happen. Code is law in a way, and this thing can propel so much of really fulfilling our potential on a global scale. And that's what I think that different than probably most people that I've met in crypto. It didn't start from investing. It didn't start from experimenting with let me buy this, and it started from what if this thing can be the best chance of our generation. But back then you couldn't do much with smart contracts, so it was merely a hope, and it took me years to get to the point that I'm able to connect the dots in a way that is meaningful. And it was clear to me that major innovation need to take place on the infrastructure level, on the railroads, on how can we build a system that have the minimum trust assumptions and third parties that are involved in the process. And my journey really started right before Ethereum transition from proof of work to proof of stake. It was clear that we're going to see many different changes happening at the protocol level and execution and consensus layers, and experimenting with different clients and with how MEVBoost will look like, how block building would look, and how much that activity will require from base layer validators. Really pushed me to understand that consensus is the only thing that validator will have to run, as execution is being subbed out to a more professional group of entities. And there is so much potential in consensus layer modularity. What if we can now require validators, not require, but offer validators to do more than just validating the chain itself? And that's really connected with how Justin Drake have proposed an Oracle design that can connect between the base layer validators and the additional task of publishing price feed data on chain. This is a proposal that were made back in 2020, and pretty much where my journey around Oracles began, of saying, what if that can happen at the protocol level, but it didn't were implemented at the protocol level because it's introduced complexities. And if we are, the name of the game is building this global settlement layer, it's need to be distributed. It's need to be globally distributed. And you need to allow home stakers, you need to allow people to join in, and you want to lower the barrier of entry. So introducing these complexities raise the barrier of entry, and that's why it was not implemented. But when later on, when I met Shriram and learned about EigenLayer, pretty much at the end of 22, beginning of 23, it became very clear that this is the best way of tapping in to this potential and creating a system that don't require all of the validator to participate. It's enough to have a subgroup of validators, as long as you do it in a permissionless manner, and as long as you make sure that incentives are not, moving this system towards centralization over time, you actually can have almost the same security guarantees as you would have if you do something like that at the protocol level. And the real question is how much of the security is actually needed. And I think that we're going to dive into this topic much more in this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's just start now with perhaps describing a little bit better of what eOracle actually is. What does it do?
eOracle, in essence, is a conduit that connect between this group that we just talked about, Ethereum validators that are willing to take on themselves an additional task, and any data consumer, any decentralized application or a rollup or a layer 2 that need certain data or need an off-chain compute. As of today, Oracles perform these tasks, but all of these data consumers have to interact with the Oracle, with the company that charge them some kind of an upfront cost, an integration cost, and then in their backend, they work with a group of validators that perform this task. But they're managed by the Oracle. They're managed by the company that's running this Oracle. And I think that with every cycle, we have this process of more and more middlemen are being abstracted away, because we have better tools and better technology to abstract the middleman and provide a direct connection, which on one side remove a single point of failure, remove some kind of centralized governance, over a certain process. But on the other end is also reducing the cost, because you're really connecting between the consumer and the provider without an entity at the center that manage both and is rent seeking. And this thing couldn't happen in the Oracle space up until today. But now through restaking and through this ability to tap into the Ethereum diverse group of validators and stake, there's a possibility of doing that.
Okay, so that's super interesting. If I understood correctly, then correct me if I missed anything. So Oracle is a decentralized Oracle. Can you say that is the most trustless version of an Oracle you can see today?
Well, let's review what do we have in the space today. So the Oracle space is the most monopolized sector in crypto today. You have one company called Chainlink that control something around 80% of the entire Oracle market. I don't think you can find any other sector in crypto that have such thing. It's pretty much standing the exact opposite of the decentralized nature of the space. Now, more than that, we are seeing innovation with new competitors like Pit that have, I think, a very good product, and they are able to provide services at low latency and high frequency. But Pit is not competing with Chainlink on making things, let's say, more transparent or more decentralized or more secure. They are competing on problems of oracles rather than on the Oracle problem itself. And a little bit more focus also on the Solana ecosystem rather than the Ethereum ecosystem. So if we think about the Ethereum ecosystem and layer 2s, on Ethereum, Chainlink have, I think, more than probably around 70% of the entire market share. On layer 2s like Polygon, it's 90% of the market share of the entire chain. It seemed quite absurd. Like even the Polygon bridge itself that's built by Polygon don't have this market share on Polygon versus other bridges. So there is something a little bit odd there. And I think that we didn't have the tools of building something that is not just coming to compete with Chainlink as another corporation, another company that just saying, trust me because I have a better brand, or trust me because I have a better business development team, or I'm going to make the user experience better, or I'm going to make the Oracle update faster, or a wider variety of assets. All of these things are great, don't get me wrong, and they are needed. But if we want to make a real change, we have to think about this problem from first principles. And I think that what I mentioned earlier in terms of Vitalik and Justin Drake suggestion around oracles are, how can we abstract away the middleman? How can we go back to base layer validators, to the widest group of independent participants, and provide a way of connecting them with this task of connecting the off-chain with the on-chain?
Okay, got it. And then how would you then, on a simple way, differentiate Oracle from the traditional way of doing Oracle? Is it you said that you're creating then the infrastructure to connect the data consumer and the data provider, right? So you're basically saying that is it permissionless on the data provider side and on the application side as well? How does it differentiate exactly in practice?
So let's start with the data provider side, which is the Ethereum validator as an operator in the system. that act as a data validator. The data validator don't need to get to some kind of a price discovery on an asset. You just need to act as a trusted connection between an external API, WebSocket, or any kind of off-chain compute, an AI instance, and bring this data, this output, this raw data, securely on-chain. So some oracles combine the data collection and the aggregation. We have separated the two, and we have moved the aggregation into smart contracts. Like we can say that the ideal architecture is doing everything, having Ethereum validators on Ethereum, doing this connection and posting this raw data into smart contract on mainnet, having a smart contract that is completely transparent to all, aggregate the data and provide you an output. And in this way, you know that I'm not trusting anything in a way beside what if this operator lied to me and he provided data to the smart contract that is either wrong or just he's trying to deceive the system in some way. And this is where you have consensus. This is where you have stake. This is why we have proof of stake systems to deal with some kind of abnormality or a group of the participants that are acting against the rules, right? But that would be something that is as close as possible to Ethereum proof of stake. But the problem is that this is not practical because Ethereum have very high gas costs. Block space is quite expensive. And doing all of that on Ethereum will mean the cost will be very high. And also it will be relatively slow because of Ethereum block time. So how can we take this ideal approach and try to create a practical approach that is as close to that as possible? And this is why we have created the eOracle chain that, in essence, it's a child chain. It's the closest thing that you can think of a layer 2 that extend Ethereum block space, completely managed by Ethereum validators for the chain validators and for the data validators. And it's have a mechanism that we have developed. It's called Aegis, that do checkpointing every period of time to Ethereum mainnet to make sure that the validator set that is managing the system is the correct validator set that staked its asset on mainnet. So that way, you also know in a cryptographic way that the entities in the system are the correct entities and they are acting according to their stake in terms of weight of their vote in the system. And doing all of that in a cryptographic way. So from that point, we now have a system that allows us to expand block space in a secure way. And this system is working in between 1 to 2 seconds time per block, where the data validators are running a light client connecting to a variety of APIs. And now we can move to the second part of your question of how does it look like from the consumer side? So consumers can either subscribe to an existing feed, an Oracle feed. Let's say that I want the Bitcoin price from Binance, or I want Tesla price from the New York Stock Exchange, or something more customized. I want the last NBA game and get me that from ESPN or get me that from Yahoo Sports. You can define that. So it's relatively simple for you to define, get me data from this API and get me this data in this granularity. And from that point, you have a system that operators, Ethereum validators connected to this API, posting this data into a smart contract. The users can also define how the smart contract will aggregate this data, right? Because if it's the price of Bitcoin, because of latency issues and also because you have price discovery that is a little bit different. Like the price of Bitcoin at any given point of time is different between Coinbase and Binance. So you would like a way to aggregate it and get an output that works for you, that is the closest to the truth. But it's hard to define truth on something like prices, as you have different prices in different markets. But it's easier to define truth on like what was the score yesterday between the Timberwolves and Dallas Nuggets. I can tell you I'm a little bit disappointed. Dallas, the Nuggets are losing 2-0. But it's easy to know that, like, there is a one answer for that. Although I wish the answer would be different, but there is one answer for that. So maybe here you would like a threshold. You would say, I need 99% of the operators to say the exact same answer, that the Timberwolves won and the Nuggets lost, and this is the exact score. And if I have 80%, I know that something might be wrong because the answer should be identical. So here you will have an aggregation that is threshold based, where on price you might have a weighted median or some kind of another way to aggregate things. Like, as an example, Pit and Chainlink aggregate data in a different way. Pit do it more on a confidence base with some kind of a range of where the price should land. While Chainlink, it's a little bit hard to know how they aggregate because it's happening completely off-chain in their own private server. So you get the output and you might know what each validator, what each operator in the system said individually, but you don't have a full transparency of the entire system. Might be good for some aspects of security, let's say, but really go against how, when we think about blockchain, when we think about decentralization and transparency, you don't want to take decisions for someone else. You want to allow users to take the decision from themselves. And this is how we are building that in a way that it's completely programmable and modular.
Wow, that sounds like extreme value actually to the whole crypto ecosystem. And I mean, personally, I've been thinking a lot about interoperability in general in the Ethereum ecosystem because it's something quite new that is actually brought by restaking now. We already had a lot of L2s and other parallel services running, as you mentioned, some here, like middle layer, but there wasn't really a good way of plugging them on a decentralized way, as you said. And then I've been thinking about the value of how oracles are actually becoming more and more strategic in the ecosystem, because you don't want to build a system to be isolated from everything else. We want them to communicate, and ideally decentralized way, right? So I'd like to, if you could share a little bit on your perspective, what is the real value of the inheriting the cryptoeconomic security from Ethereum versus creating your own network security for building an oracle, for example?
So I very much agree with you on interoperability and the growing importance of that. I think it's important to define what are oracles in this, let's say, middleware, in the bigger middleware group. You can also think about bridges for interoperability and other solutions. But if we go back to first principles, blockchain, in essence, do three major things. They come to consensus on three major things: on token ledgers, on private key signatures, and on state machines. And oracles are needed in order to come to consensus on everything that blockchain can come to consensus on, which is what is external to the blockchain itself, but is still needed for applications to provide all of the new services and the existing use case that we have in DeFi and the ever-growing use cases that we will see in upcoming years. So in the past, we used to have mainnet with thousands, tens of thousands of dApps. We moved to layer 2s that take some of these dApps that are building on top of them. And we are now moving into a space that is growing very rapidly as many of the L2s becoming stacks that make deploying rollup as simple as deploying a contract, and rollup as a service providers that act in abstracting away the complexity in hosting your nodes. So we are on track to see by the end of this year, maybe over 1,000 different rollups deployed. And many of these rollups need oracles. Many of these rollups need a variety of interoperability services. So moving away from a space that can depend on one Oracle smart contract that many dApps use, to a lot of Oracle services that each one of them needs its own integration. So the Oracle space, the market for Oracles, is growing rapidly. And I think that none of us want to see a situation where the same dependency and centralization that we have today is growing across all of the stacks. Ethereum is decentralizing really with every year. In client diversity, data availability, home stakers that are growing, and we are not seeing the same trend happening with middlewares. And we have to remember that at the end of the day, these middlewares are companies that generate a lot of money and have a lot of value. They don't have any real interest in decentralizing themselves. That's not something that tend to happen on its own. So we as an industry need to find the ways of thinking what is the values that bring us to the space, and how can we build things that actually conform with these values. So crypto economic security is something I think stand pretty much at the opposite of trusting in a brand name. So when you work with an existing solution, like let's say something that is very known to all, but you don't really know how exactly it works, you say, I trust this brand to work well because it's have worked well for the past few years for me and for others, and I don't really need to know how it's working. I just trust that tomorrow will look like yesterday. And I don't know if that's a naive thinking that we can allow ourselves to have when we are building in this space. It's expecting for the same major incident that's happening every cycle to just repeat themselves. And this is like a big part of our mission, and what propel us is, are we building something that is abstracting away one of the biggest risks in the space? And how, when we're building our system, we should think from first principles in taking every single action. So it's really start from, we are not trying to put ourselves at the center. We are trying to inherent security that is already established and exists in the most trustless way that we can, while still making it practical, like we said before. So crypto economic security is half of it. I would say a little bit less than half of it. And what is a little bit more than half of it is who is behind this crypto economic security. So we have a diverse set of Ethereum validators that already exist and are globally distributed. And we have the stake, over $100 billion stake on Ethereum today. We launched roughly a month ago, and we already have over $5 billion of security in the system, of restaked it. Currently over 70 operators and over 23,000 stakers. And the goal is, how can we build a system that allow them to build a system that is aware of itself in a way that all of their actions are being tracked on chain. No one need to trust any kind of, our own private servers that saying this operator did that and should be paid, or this operator didn't do that and should not be paid and maybe even should be penalized. So that's the goal of a system, to be aware of itself, to have a ledger that track all of the different actions, and also able to provide any third party, any consumer, a way to interact with the system and either create a new market or to consume data in the most simple way possible. So that's the big overview that stands very much in construct in the opposite in essence than working with some kind of a brand that have a subscription fee and then a contract with the lawyer that tell you send me $10,000 for you to start working with my system, and I'm managing something at the back end.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you remove this gatekeeping, right, as well. Otherwise, you depend on being chosen to be interacted and be able to consume or provide the data that, yeah, sounds great. And then I think the question that comes almost naturally after that is for any decentralized system to be sustainable and secure, actually, we need to properly think about the incentives. How do we make sure that you positively incentivize good behavior and negatively incentivize bad behavior? How does a Oracle economics work?
So in the most simple way is you start with a system that is aware at the end of what we just said a moment ago, the system that is aware of all of its actions and track them. So you have this accounting system that is agreed upon by all. And then you define what is being considered as an optimal functioning of an operator. This is something that might change over time. Like right now, it's very simple. It's stake, you're subscribed to all of the data feeds and you provide them and you do your work. But in the future, the goal is to become a marketplace where in this marketplace, some data will be worth more than others, some feeds subscribing and providing certain computation, off-chain compute, worth more than other, and you are allowing price discovery to take place on-chain in a very similar way of how Uniswap change on-chain trading and really allow price discovery to take place between supply and demand. So we are building a system where supply and demand can define what is the price of a certain data feed, where operators on one side said, hey, this is easy for me. It's very easy for me to connect to these 10 APIs and provide you this data. The cost of that for me is 50 cents a month. I'm just querying this API. Anyway, I'm running this system, adding this additional data costs nothing. So maybe this feed will cost close to nothing. But now maybe you want to get data that is coming from a pay-gated API. So up there, you have an upfront cost of connecting. Or maybe you require something that is heavy and the computation of that require a little bit more effort on your side. So first of all, you have a higher cost. But there is also a question of demand. If dApps are sharing this demand, you are now have more payment and you have scale behind this exact feed. So the simple answer is open market. We believe that an open market is a better solution than anything that we know of, where we take a step back from subscription and upfront cost and integration cost and allow supply and demand to define this new market, while we do incentivize this market early on. We help to bootstrap these markets. We help to connect between the entities that don't really know yet early on how to operate this system. So early on, we were going to build this feed by feed, market by market, and connect between supply and demand in a way that is manageable. And hopefully, quickly move to the point that we are able to step back. And maybe we are creating new markets because we are tracking the system and we are seeing there is some kind of a supply, there is some kind of a demand that we think is growing, and we want to enable it, and we want to simplify the process of creating a new market and acting as solvers in the system, so as data creators. But Uniswap don't do that today, right? Uniswap don't really add pairs. You don't come to the Uniswap team and tell them add support to the Eigen token. It's just going to happen on its own. You're going to have liquidity providers on the operator side here that provide the liquidity, and then you have data consumers, traders on the Uniswap example, that come in and interact with this market. And on the long term, this is where Oracle will land. The question is, how good are we able, and how simple we are able to make this system so there is not a burden of how do I interact with this new product.
Okay, yeah, I had a question to the end of our conversation about the end game, but I'm already surprised by imagining the idea of the marketplace and very enthusiastic about it actually. And I really believe that it's quite beautiful because it just offers the space for things to happen. And if a feed is valuable, if there's good demand, automatically providers will show up. If there are providers to feeds that are not consumable, or that no one is really interested, they're gonna move away to something that will bring money. So just it happens, right? It's like just naturally happen. I really like this layout. And then I was wondering here on the decentralization side, how many operators are you guys working with, or where do you plan to go in terms of like how big is your operator set? Because if there is one thing we have seen as an operator ourselves is the complexity of actually coordinating a decentralized set, right? Nobody really talks about it, but when you need to really coordinate things happening, decentralized networks need coordination, some level, at least to bootstrap, to be in this beginning level, I would say. So curious to know from you if you, in this first month, is there any interesting insights that you could share from this experience of bootstrapping a decentralized network?
Well, we are in testnet since December of last year, pretty much the end of November. And we progressed since with the EigenLaunch to mainnet last month in April. We currently have over 70 operators in the system, and there is a burden of coordination though that take place. We are trying to work with the operators that are early adopters in Eigen and really provide them with support in how they interact with this new system. And I think this question is for both of us. I don't know, like on the Chorus One side, if you can provide us some feedback from this process, how has it been for you? But yeah, I don't think I have the perfect answer. It's a growing process that will require a lot of work and support and operation work. Operating well is required in every single business, especially when you have a lot of participants.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I tend to think about what I call invisible work, because everyone tends to think, most people think about a system as something that is done, right? We run this, so it's done. You put there, it's run, forget about it. It's never like this. System is a living thing, and it needs upgrades, it needs communication, even though it is decentralized. I think on the operator side is something that we really value is establishing relationships with more people in the ecosystem, other operators running, because you can have a quick, let's say, learning share. I think this is important. And yeah, the human relationship and the human level, I still believe it's quite important and makes things easier, I think, on my personal opinion, at least. And for Chorus One, it's just the same. I think we run more than 50 networks now. So AVSs are definitely a new thing for us, but something that we have been working with teams as well since the early this year, and now just onboarding mainnet. So something that definitely also learning together with you guys, and yeah, maturing, I would say. But there's also on the restaking thing is the LRT, the liquid restaking protocols. Some teams we have also been working very closely with, and I imagine you too. So I'd like to know from your side, how has these conversations going for eOracle? What's important when it comes to liquid restaking protocols? How much do you believe in that, and any insights you can share?
So many AVSs choose to close some kind of deals for stake, for economic security, with LRTs, and they define like a number that they thought they need, and close some kind of an agreement for that. We think that this is probably not the best way forward. It's much better to create a system that you build the incentive for, again, supply and demand, here for economic security, on chain. So we have launched a point system. We are the only AVS with a point system from since we launched, because we actually want to track who is providing value to the system, and what we can understand from that. We are soon to launch also a cap on the operator side. So the goal is to make sure that we don't have one operator that have so much stake and so much vote, so much weight in the system, that go pretty much against everything that we have discussed in this conversation. So we will create this cap per operator, and then later on, when the system will mature, we also will have a better understanding of how much security is needed at any given point of time. The elasticity of being able to have the security that you need, and maybe give back security when you don't need it, and onboard security again, will be very crucial, again, when slashing is enabled. Because right now, the security in the system is, the requirements on the staker side is relatively low. The risk is relatively low. But when we will introduce slashing on it, the risk will grow. And then you need to evaluate, is it worth it for me? Right now, I don't have a place to put this ETH and how to earn additional yield. Maybe we want to see Eigen competitors also that will offer different things. So then you're going to have, even if you don't have risk, you're going to have a market. It's not like you don't have risk. You still have smart contract risk. You still have certain risk in the operator, maybe certain risk in the LRTs, risk like we just saw a few days ago, the issue when the Renzo Easy Eat price went down dramatically and led to some liquidations. People got hurt. There were risk for them. It wasn't related to an AVS, but it's still a risk in the system. So there are risks. It's important to be aware of them. I think that this situation can be avoided, especially when you have an asset that is being backed. So this is also an Oracle instance when, how do you value this asset that is completely backed by it, but it's not tradable. It's not liquid in the market. You're not able to redeem it against the issuer, and it doesn't have a market. It's have a secondary market, and the secondary market with lower liquidity define what's the price of it, but it's completely backed by it. You can see that on a smart contract, completely backed by it. So are you allowing people to be liquidated because the secondary market is moving its price? Maybe that's the right answer for some lending markets that want to stay solvent at any given point of time and are not allowing, even for a short period of time, to get out of what they have considered to the safe zone of those positions. You don't want to put the liquidity provider on their market at any risk. But maybe we also think about the users of this platform, even if they are more degen, even if they are more risk, if they're willing to take more risk, we also think about them as users, and we're trying to find a way not to liquidate them in a situation like that. So going away from trying to go back to the core of your question, and what we are talking about is, it's a completely new field. We are building in a new ecosystem. And it's important, one, to have this human relationship with your operators, with the AVSs, with the LRTs. We are having a lot of conversation with the LRTs and about how we can support them. We are the only, again, the AVS that provide points and APIs, so they can also really have an understanding with their stakers what they're doing, what they're getting. And we are announcing ahead of time this cap, and then after that we will announce how much security we're actually going to, let's say, need in the system, and how we're going to incentivize that, and how we're going to correlate between the weight of the stake in the system and the actual vote in the Oracle functioning. It's important to build in the open, and it's important to make sure that you bring your partners along with your ideas. A lot of the ideation, we are working very close with the Eigen team since beginning of 2023. So we had a lot of, let's say, situations where we had an open question and we thought about it together and we figured out what is the best solution forward. And we hope to do so for the next, generation of AVSs and new builders come into the space and new operators.
Great. And then thinking about that human relationship, then what is the best way for people who want to get to know you guys better, or get closer, or even find ways to get involved? Is there like conferences you guys will be attending soon, or what's the best way?
So first of all, you can always reach out to us through Twitter. That's eOracle_network. And if you want to know more, and if you want to be really in the know of what is about to happen, you can join our Discord and learn more about really things before they are announced everywhere. I'm probably going to be in HCC. That's the next conference. I don't know. Are you coming to HCC this year?
Yes, I'm very excited. We'll be in Brussels. I'll be there with some other people as well from Course One. Who should definitely try to find a way to hang out. And also everyone who is listening to this, feel free to reach out to us. We can, let's find the eOracle team there together.
Awesome.